Welcome back to the Counselor's Soapbox video channel, our series on learning about alcohol. Today in part 2, we're going to talk about why people drink and approaches that have been taken to when that drinking becomes a problem. A number of theories have been proposed about why people drink and why they like the effects of alcohol. Some people say they drink to reduce anxiety and to cope with stress. It does give people feelings of power, and it changes consciousness. There's also a lot of expectations around alcohol, and we'll see in the future that what a person expects alcohol to do often is what the alcohol does do. There are many myths about alcohol and what it does to you. People believe that it makes you warmer. The truth is that it dilates the capillaries near the skin, and so you lose heat more rapidly. Other people believe that alcohol makes them sexy or more sexual. It disinhibits people, and they will do things while intoxicated they wouldn't normally do, but in fact, alcohol interferes with sexual performance. It is also believed by some people that it makes you more of a man or a woman to consume alcohol. That's a myth, and it's something that people need to examine for themselves. The belief that it cures your ills, particularly your emotional ills, turns out to be a trap that makes things worse, not better. Some people feel it can be used to make them less scared, and while it may work temporarily, when it wears off, they are going to be more anxious. The belief that it makes you function better also turns out to be a myth. And many people have the belief that everyone drinks. It turns out that about half of the people in the United States have not had a drink in the last 30 days. Despite how common alcohol is and the positive attitudes many people have towards alcohol, we find that alcohol causes lots of pain and tragedy. There are very few cultures on earth which promote temperance or abstinence. Through this series, we will talk about the real nature of the costs and problems with alcohol. Problems with alcohol consumption have been recognized for a long time. Some of the historical responses to alcohol problems were to see the problem as a sin or moral failing. Problems were often treated simply as legal issues, and people began to see the problems with alcohol that they might be caused by a disease once we recognize the nature of diseases among humans. Our modern approach to treating alcohol problems has its roots in the temperance movement. The temperance movement began as a humanitarian movement and was influential in establishing things such as child labor laws, working for prison reform, advocating for women's rights, and for the abolition of slavery. This movement included things like social welfare and poverty laws. An early part of it had to do with the Women's Christian Temperance Union and the Anti-Saloon League. The movement towards prohibition in the United States, sometimes referred to as the Great Experiment, began with the Anti-Saloon League. Initially, the effort was to restrict or eliminate establishments where people went to drink. One reason for this was that political discussions were often conducted in saloons, and women were not permitted. Hence, they were excluded from the political process. There was also an objection to places where men could go and get drunk, but women didn't know what they were doing. So the Anti-Saloon League did not try to eliminate drinking, but only commercial establishments which served liquor. Eventually, we passed the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which created Prohibition, and it restricted drinking in the United States. The 18th Amendment prohibited the sale, commercial manufacture, and transportation of alcohol. However, it did not prohibit people making beverages in their own home for their own consumption or consuming alcohol they already had. It was eventually repealed. The 21st Amendment ended Prohibition, but historians now question whether or not it worked. There's some evidence that Prohibition had some positive effects. During Prohibition, alcohol-related medical illnesses declined, and so did the average amount of alcohol consumed. What didn't decline was the establishment of organized crime to fill the demand for alcohol. Today, we have the same condition of prohibition with drugs and the same problem with organized crime and involved in providing the drugs that people want. Often when we have a problem that involves people, we find that the labels we apply to those people become derogatory. So over time, the terminology used continues to change. At one point, we blamed the person and called them inebriates or drunkards. Later, it was changed to the term alcoholic. We differentiate between people with essentially an addiction to alcohol from those with an addiction to drugs by calling the drug addicts addicts, and we have a different terminology for those addicted to nicotine by calling them smokers. In early terminology, in the diagnosing of problems, they were often called chemically dependent, and for a while we went through calling them either having a substance abuse problem or a substance dependence and making that distinction. Today we have moved to the term substance use disorder and find that that can come in mild forms, moderate forms, or severe forms. Early treatment efforts, including medical hospitals or sanitariums, were largely ineffective. So the movement to treat alcohol-related problems became part of the self-help movement. There were groups called the Washingtonians and the Oxford group, which worked on a broad range of problems, but because of this broad focus, passed from existence. They were followed by AA, and in the early history of alcoholism studies, Jellinek studied the early members of AA and how they had recovered. From the Alcoholics Anonymous self-help movement, Narcotics Anonymous developed. Later on, there were other 12-step groups, probably over 200 different varieties at this point. Recently, we've seen some other self-help groups, but their numbers are usually relatively small and not available everywhere. There's been an effort recently to create a system of care for those people with both drug and alcohol problems. Originally, there were some alcohol counselors. That has evolved into drug and alcohol counselors. Some places license counselors in the substance abuse field. Here in California, because licensed counselors and therapists are master's level or PhD level, there's been a resistance to licensing counselors. The state created a system of registering people who were going to work as drug and alcohol counselors, and those people then move towards being certified. Increasingly, we are seeing advanced level professionals. In California, it would be licensed marriage and family therapists who work in the substance abuse field, and most recently, licensed professional clinical counselors who have additional training in drug and alcohol and group work. We are seeing more and more advanced degrees in alcohol and drug counseling working in this field. As drug and alcohol treatment has grown more mature, there's been more assistance from state and federal government. SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, publishes a lot of materials that are applicable to both mental health and drug and alcohol counseling. There's also been research by the NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, NIAAA, which is the alcoholism group, and NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse. Interesting to note that these two groups have never merged and that drugs and alcohol continue to have separate organizations, even at the federal government level. Alcoholism treatment is sometimes publicly funded. It is often privately funded. People either pay themselves or some programs may take insurance. There's a thing called sober living, but that is more a matter of housing in most areas and unregulated. There's some residential drug and alcohol treatment, although most of these are rehabs and mainly focus on drugs. Therapeutic communities are often run by people who have gone through the program and are self-supporting. Outpatient treatment is more common than residential treatment these days, largely because of the cost of providing beds and meals. Despite the development of more treatment options, the majority of people who do get assistance do so through self-help groups, mostly 12-step groups. Because of the parity and the Affordable Care Act, more insurance companies are now covering treatment for both drug addiction and alcoholism, and more people who were not able to afford it are now able to obtain insurance and seek treatment. There's also been a movement towards harm reduction that for some people, giving up alcohol, drinking, may not be a viable goal, but getting them to drink in moderation or when they drink, not drive, may reduce the harm to themselves and to society. In looking at alcohol and alcoholism and problems from drinking, we have to look at the connection to the alcoholic beverage industry. One of the challenges has been advertising. How much advertising is simply product information, and how much is encouraging people to consume more and more alcohol. There have been some restrictions, but there is still advertising for alcohol going on. One of the criticisms of the alcoholic beverage industry and the tobacco industry has been their use of cartoon characters to encourage younger people to be interested in drinking. There's also been a lot of effort by the beverage industry to place signs in retail establishments. Many of these are placed on the front counters at a low eye level where children see them. The beverage industry and the tobacco industry have both been criticized for targeting the underage market. One of the efforts here was to create new beverages in colors and flavors that might appear to appeal to younger consumers and to get them started on drinking. Also, some products have been marketed specifically to appeal to women and minorities and other special populations such as the mentally ill. Anyone interested in the field of drug and alcohol rehab or counseling has to look seriously at the difference in the way that illegal drugs and legal or almost legal drugs are treated. In most drug treatment programs, tobacco gets totally overlooked. Research has suggested that those people who attempt to quit smoking at the same time they give up other drugs do better than those who do not give up tobacco. We're seeing a movement towards marijuana legalization or decriminalization, and we're not sure how things were going to change in the future. Will problems with excessive marijuana use be covered under treatment, and will there need to be specific programs developed for those people with marijuana issues in the same way that there are separate programs for those people who only have an alcohol use disorder? What's ahead? Over the next few months, we're going to look at a lot more information in the Learning About Alcohol series. There will also be some additional drug education videos and mental health and wellness videos. If you've enjoyed this video, please click the like button directly below. Comments are always appreciated. To receive new videos in this series, please subscribe. Thank you for watching the Counselor's Soapbox video channel. For more information on these topics, please visit the Counselorssoapbox.com blog, where you will find over 1,500 articles on mental health, substance abuse, and having a happy life. The David Joel Miller fiction and nonfiction books are available on Amazon. Photos here are courtesy of Pixabay and Wikimedia Commons and are all licensed under Creative Commons free for commercial use licenses. Thank you again for watching.